Hey guys, this is Thiago, aka Ace Lion for ultimatepokercoaching.com, and today I have like three hands that we can go over it, so let's get right into it. First hand, we open here the King 7 off on the button, pretty standard. 26 effective going post flop. We get the 986 rainbow, and on this flop, we're gonna be doing a lot of check back here. We lack the offsuit straights here, like the 10-7 off and the 7-5 off. We also lack the offsuit two pairs here, uh, the 8-6 off and the 9-6 off two pairs. That villain has all in the range in his range, and we lack in ours. So we want to do a lot of check back here. Even with hands like aces and kings, we just want to check back to protect the ace highs that we're gonna have. And we want to bet hands like 10s and jacks here and our strongest 9x. So I decided to check back this one. We get the 5 on the turn here, bringing a backdoor flush draw. And I expect villain and population to have a very high frequency lead here. Should be a very polarized and maybe a small sizing here in theory. Villain can even go geometric here and just pot and a little bit over betting here given the discrepancy on the straight and two pair components. Villain chose this 40-ish% sizing, and we're gonna play our hand here and our range, mostly calling. There's no point in raising here. After we check back, let's say aces or kings, there's no point in raising here on this turn. So we're gonna be doing a lot of calling. Solver might like a raise here only with like 7x of spades type hands and some spade draws. The 7x of spades to free roll villain 7x, but mainly calling. And on the 8 river here, pairing the board. When we face a 75% bet, there's no point really in shoving here. We don't get called by worse when we shove. Some rack might call with 8x, you just get to the point that, oh, I have trips and he just can't fold. But there's really no point here in shoving. You're only gonna get called mostly by boats or better straights like the 10-7. So we're just calling here, and villain shows the queen deuce off, which I don't think it's a good defend pre-flop. This hand here, it's a clear example how population sizings are really suboptimal and how we can exploit and make reads out of them. So cutoff opens, we have a pretty standard defend. Our range should look something like this in theory, versus the cutoff every suited hand, and this hand is close to the bottom here of the 10x offsuit, and it's actually mixing 14% of the time to a 3-bet pre-flop, going 5x here when we're 50 effective, 60 effective. Throwing some offsuit ace-x here and some offsuit king-x, some offsuit broadways here at some frequency, and the value hands. So we're gonna be checking range here. There are some flops we can lead, but this is not one of them. In position player here, he can have a lot of sizings in a spot like this. He can bet small, medium, large, and even have a overbet strategy. This hand plays a check call mostly, I would expect in theory. And our value check raisers are gonna be ace jack, king jack, pocket fours, 10-4 suited, blocking jack X, jack tens, and then our bluffs are gonna come from gutters with the high card club, and open enders and flush draws. Check calling here, pretty standard, and the turn is a blank. We're gonna have some leads here on this turn, I believe, because we don't check call with air, and villain bets a lot of air. So we were gonna have leads. I don't think this hand qualifies for a lead. high frequency cards that we can lead on would be a 10 and a 4. Maybe some a 9 of clubs, queen of clubs, clubs that fill straights. Villain goes for like a 35% sizing, and this is really not a thing here on a turn like this after I just check call. I'm kinda capped, so I'm stripped of strong hands, strong jack X, two pairs, and trips, and sets. So imposition sizing here should be very polarized. Um, I think there's gonna be a lot of overbetting here at the stack depth on a card like this. So you can already tell he doesn't have a really strong hand. Some players play like 10x like this. They don't want to get check raised and they want to get by the river type thing, so they can just check back. So a lot of players play some 10x like this, some like weak jack x that they don't want to get raised or bet big. So we have a pretty easy check call here versus this sizing. And once the clubs come in, I don't think we're gonna have many leads played like this. We want to check raise our flushes. There might be some flushes that want to bet here in theory. We can take a look after in a sim. So what happens here on the river is that we have 4 buckets. So to simplify our strategy, we have the nuts, which has flexible lines that can check or bet, and for the stack depth I'll be just checking here with some ace high flushes to check raise and check shove. So when you think about the story that he's telling here in this hand, so he bets small on the flop, he bets small on the turn. So he doesn't really have a strong hand here. A hand like ace jack likes to bet big on the turn, especially if it doesn't have a club. So he's basically saying he rivered the flush. It's what I was thinking in game. And having the 8 of clubs is very nice here to bluff catch, given the story that he's telling. So yeah, I decided to go for the check call because I thought the story really doesn't make sense. And he had the ace 4 with the ace of clubs. I think betting flop is fine, and I think his sizing on the turn is really bad. I think if you want to have the ace of clubs by the river and the river's a club, you want to overbet, shove for like 2x spot or something, and blocking 5-4. Suited as well 5-4 for me. Yeah, he should just go like I don't know, like 15 here on the turn, 15 big blinds, and like overbet shove the river with this hand. He just made it really easy for me here. So let's take a look at PIO Solver and see what it has to say. So going through the sim here of the 10-8 hand, we're gonna check range, and villain strategy here is to see bet a lot, as I have imagined. So see betting here around 80% of the time, mainly for a small sizing, but there's also a medium, large, and an overbet sizing. In the sim, I chose 30%, 60, 90, and 125%. You can see that all sizings are used here, and there's a preference for the small sizing, but mixing. You can see that I had like 8 like queens plus really likes to overbet here. You can see that the main part of the overbetting range is coming from the queens plus bucket. Vulnerable but strong hands like ace jack here as well, mixing into overbetting. So the nuts is being threatened on a board like this. Jack 10 4 flush draw. Um, we're not gonna be overbetting with sets, as I imagine. Apart from the pocket fours, which does overbet and bet big, which makes sense. I'm blocking pairs and flush draws. Um, so yeah, there is some overbetting here with some flush draws, some ace-high flush draws, and a lot of third sizing used. We check villain did bet a third, and as expected, our strongest hands are going to be check raised. I use the 4x sizing in the sim, given the nature of the flop. So yeah, our strongest hands here is Jack, King Jack, pocket fours, pure raising. I mentioned 10-4 suited, Jack 4 suited as well with two pairs, and the bluffs coming from the open-enders, right, and gutters with a club. That I thought it's a common thing in the sims. So we have the queen 9 here, mainly check raising when we have the high card club, and like queen 8 here, pure raising with a club. Queen 8 makes more sense to check raise than queen 9 because it's only a gutter and it has less equity than a hand like queen 9, so makes sense. Just check calling here. If all over 10x, there's no point in raising. There's a little bit of mixing here with like 10-8, 11% or so with this combo. But yeah, weak Jack X, we just want to check call, and the flush draws are going to be mixing. Our sorts of flush draws mix. We check called, and the turn was a blank. It was the 5 of hearts, if I believe. Yes, the 5 of hearts. And there's gonna be leading here. It's kind of surprising to some people, but the thing is, we don't check call with air. We don't have like king deuce of hearts here. Villain c bets king deuce of hearts at some frequency, right? So we don't check call air, and villain has a lot of air. So we're gonna have a lead here for small sizing, 30%. I put in the donking strategy, 30, 60, and 90. So small, medium, large to simplify the strategy, and just to get like a big vision of what it should look like. So yeah, our hand does mix sometimes here with a club, around 20%. Leading some weak Jack X, some 10x even. Had like queen 10 suited leading. So yeah, there's like a pretty high frequency lead. I was not expecting this at all here. We check. Yeah, and as expected, the small sizing is not a thing here on this turn card. It's leaning towards what I thought would be the overbet sizing, and the 90% and the 60%. So it's pretty intuitive for some of you guys, but it might not be for some other people. So 5 of hearts, and the range continues here, 50% frequency, and so we check in the middle. These hands here, we usually bluff from the bottom up, so these middling hands here just want to take the showdown and just give up, and we're gonna continue with the bottom of the range. Yeah, so like a hand like king deuce, king 3 are the bottom of the king x range that has no showdown value. continuing here with a lot of the Broadway stuff, the open-enders, the top pairs, hands. So villain you chose the 30% sizing. It's going to kind of mess up the sim. Not mess up the sim, but since it's a sizing that's not used a lot, the villain's range by the river, it's gonna look quite weird. Um, we can value raise here pretty thinly, as you can see when villain chooses that sizing. A hand like Jack 7 suited here is mixing to check raise. And hands that we didn't want to check raise on the flop, we are check raising turn with. Now, check call, and the river was the 3 of clubs. Yeah, so there's not much leading. I thought some leading would come up in the club after, especially after Villa bet so small, but for some reason the only hand that's leading here is like Jack 8. And the Jack 8 off as well. We check. And yeah, so it looks pretty weird here, the villain's range, because of that sizing not being really a thing. And villain chose like a 60% sizing on the river. And yeah, as I thought, the 10-8 with a club should be calling. We're actually calling here with some 10x as well. This is two. No, this is 2 pair. Not check raising with 2 pair. Check raisings are coming from flushes, and I assume, yeah, ace of clubs blocker and flushes. The raise sizing is just all in here. Yeah, very interesting sim. So yeah, guys, good stuff. Really hope you took something out of this, especially the sizings on the turn. When the turn is such a blank, we're not gonna use small sizings. And when villain story doesn't make sense, we usually wanna call when we have a hand that has good blockers. So yeah, best of luck to you guys at the tables.